Hi, my name's Daryl, and today I'm going to talk to you about a really popular tool among Wrangler owners called JSCAN, which is basically a software product that uses an OBD dongle to connect to your OBD2 port. And it allows you to make modifications to your Jeep Wrangler and also do troubleshooting and diagnostics. Now it works with Jeep, Dodge, Ram, and Chrysler-based automobiles as well. So one of the most important things that JSCAN lets you do is to change your tire's diameter size in the engine's computer. So one of the first things that many Wrangler owners do is they go with larger diameter tires because it's better for off-road and bigger is better. But when you do that, it messes up your speedometer and also your computer's estimated gas mileage. And so to get those correct, you actually have to go into the computer and you have to change that tire diameter size. Now you can go to the dealer and have them do it, but they charge an awful lot to do that, and you can do it relatively inexpensively with JSCAN. Now of course you can do more than just change the tire size in JSCAN. Some of the more important features that it allows you to do is when you do upgrade your tires, a lot of times users feel like they lose performance because of that higher rolling resistance and the heavier tire. So they go with the higher gear ratio, and JSCAN will let you modify your computer for that updated gear ratio. Along those same lines, whenever you go with a larger diameter tire, especially like an all-terrain tire or a mud terrain tire, you're going to have to lower the tire pressure. So you need to modify the tire pressure monitoring systems, its threshold, so that the TPMS warning light isn't constantly on, and JSCAN will let you do that. JSCAN also really helps out with off-road performance. So when you're off-roading, you're going to find that having traction control on actually hinders your performance. And so on the Jeep, on the control panel, there's a traction control kill button that you can hit, but that doesn't totally turn traction control on. There are still some things that are in place that actually will kind of make it more difficult for you. But with JSCAN, you can actually turn traction control totally off, and that'll make off-roading a lot better. So in addition to allowing you to make changes to your Jeep's computer based on modifications that you've made, it also includes this really cool app. It's called trailview. And basically what trailview does is it lets you see at a glance a whole bunch of different parameters that will make it easier when you're off-roading or even when you're towing. If you have a Rubicon, it will let you lock the front or rear axles or disconnect the sway bars, even in 4 high, as opposed to just doing it in 4 low. Lastly, JSCAN is really a fantastic diagnostic and troubleshooting tool. So yeah, it'll let you read DTCs or diagnostic trouble codes like any other scanner. But one unique feature of JSCAN is it lets you look at basically any electronic module to see if it's not acting as it should. And so that's really a great feature of JSCAN. Now there are other tools on the market, but for Wrangler owners, I think the JSCAN product has been around the longest. It's certainly the least expensive. I think it's the best supported, and I also think it's probably one of the most reliable. Now when comparing JSCAN to its primary competitor, Taser, you're going to find that it's $230 less than the Taser Mini. The Taser Lite is kind of the scaled down version of the Taser, and you still save $120 over purchasing JSCAN versus the Taser Lite. Now the one big thing that Taser has over the JSCAN is it does support disabling the auto stop start system, but honestly I don't think that's all that big of a deal because you can turn that system off just with the touch of a button inside the Jeep. But for the most part, both systems do similar things. But in a lot of respects, the JSCAN is actually a little more full-featured because it is software, and so it lets you do a lot of troubleshooting on your Jeep that the Taser doesn't let you do. So one of the huge benefits of JSCAN over the Taser product line is that with JSCAN, you basically configure the product using your iPhone or Android device. With the Taser product, because it's kind of a proprietary hardware system, basically it's kind of integrated into the Jeep, and you actually have to use the cruise control buttons on the steering wheel to configure the product, which I think it's a little bit confusing and cumbersome, especially if you don't do it all the time. So for instance, I follow the Way of Life channel, and Eddie, he's one of my favorite YouTubers as far as Jeep Wranglers. He was having to configure it after he hadn't used it for a little while, and this is what happened.
So if I recall, I need to take this to audio. Hold the left arrow key. Press cruise, cancel. Okay, I wish I could have actually filmed the whole process of what I just did, but it took me a little refreshing to get it right.
And so yeah, it can be a little bit confusing. So that's one of the reasons I really like JSCAN. So as I was preparing for this video, I researched a couple of different products. So I did a kind of a comprehensive feature comparison between all of the products, and I created a Google sheet. And I also listed out kind of JSCAN only features as well as Taser only features. And so you'll find that Google sheet in this video's description. They are kind of all pretty similar, and I think JSCAN has a little more flexibility and it's less expensive. So the first thing I do is install the JSCAN software onto my iPhone. So I would basically just go to the App Store, do a search for OBD JSCAN, and then download it. If you've got an Android device, I would assume that there's some sort of Android store that you would go to and install that. Now, one really nice thing about JSCAN compared to the competitors is it lets you download and use the software basically for free. There's a demo mode, so you can play around with it without actually even attaching it to your Jeep, which is really cool. When you have the actual hardware, you can still continue to use the software, basically fully featured. It just won't let you make any changes to it until you've actually installed the license for the software. Okay, so we have the JSCAN software installed. We've decided we like it, we want to use it, so we need to connect the JSCAN software to our Jeep, but in order to do that, we have to get a dongle. So this is the one I have. It's the V-Linker MC Plus. They do have multiple devices, not just this V-Linker, but the V-Linker is really inexpensive. I think it was like 30 bucks, so it works fine. And then you also have to get this security gateway cable, and we'll be installing this. I think this was like 17 bucks. You can also find a link to that onto this video's description, the Amazon link to it. So let's go ahead and get these items installed. All right, the first part of the install is we have to get access to the security gateway cables and unplug them. And they're really close to the OBD2 port, which is right here. I found that it's just easier to get access to that port by removing this trim piece right here. So if you have a trim panel removal tool, or a spoon will just work, you can use that to remove that panel, and that'll make getting access to those cables a lot easier. So let's do that first. So I'm gonna get in here and just use this tool, use the spoon to remove this trim panel piece. And then you basically just do the same thing on the other side. Okay, and once that's removed, then we'll have a little better access for getting to those cables. Okay, I'm gonna get here in my iPhone, and it's really hard to get a good image of this, but basically you wanna go to the back side of the connector and push down on a clip. My finger, and what I'm gonna do is push on it and then just kind of swivel it back and forth just a little bit as I'm pulling. And then that's gonna hopefully let me get it out of there. And got it. Okay, and then basically do the same thing for the next connector. So you can feel that back piece with the tab on it, and then just kind of swivel back and forth after you've got it. And there it goes. So just to give you a little focus on this connector, this is the little thing that depresses right there. So you basically just push it in like so, and then you pull it out. All right, so now once those cables are disconnected, these are the security gateway cables, then what you do is you connect the security gateway cable that you purchased, and it kind of intercepts the signal, I guess you could say. And so then we're going to connect the big one into the big one here, and then it will just snap right into place. And then we put the small one into the small one. Okay, and that'll snap right into place. Okay. And then the last step really of our hardware install is to connect the OBD dongle to this. Now I did try to connect the OBD dongle to the actual OBD port, but I think because of the security gateway measures, it just wouldn't let me, it wouldn't work quite right. Nevertheless, just to get it to work, then we connect our OBD port to the OBD connection here, and you can see it'll start lighting up, which means it's getting power, and then we're pretty much good to go. At this point, you would probably want to install your trim panel back in place and then kind of tuck this up underneath. All right, so now that we have the hardware installed, we can now start the JSCAN software and connect it to your Jeep. To do that, we're going to hit the start button twice on your Jeep, and that will basically turn it into the run position. So the first one is accessories, and the second one, it puts it into the run position. And then from there, we can actually start the JSCAN software. Now, when the software starts up, it's going to ask you to select the type of car that you have. And I'm going to choose the Wrangler JL. And it's going to basically prepare the vehicle data. And then it's going to ask you, how do you want to connect? Now, we talked about demo mode a little bit, where you could just click demo, and it's kind of like a full functioning thing. It's not really connected, but we're going to auto connect it with Bluetooth. And so I'm going to click that. And I think that's kind of the standard for the kind of adapters that are currently available for the JSCAN. And when you hit that, it's then going to automatically connect to your vehicle. And then we're at the home screen, basically. Now, I actually have a license already on my iPhone that's connected to the VIN number on the Jeep. If I didn't have a VIN number or a license already installed, at this point it would actually bring up a screen asking me if I wanted to continue and use it, the free version without a license, or if I wanted to look at licensing information. At that point, I could actually purchase a license for the vehicle. Now, I think for a single license, it's $20.99, so really cheap. But you can still continue to use it. You just aren't able to actually make any changes. So you can see what it looks like, and you can see what the current values on your Jeep are, but you aren't able to make any changes. Now, just to give a little summary of this screen here at the home, we have the quick diagnostics, which will basically read any sort of codes. Now, I don't have any codes, at least I don't think I do, but let me click on the quick diagnostics, and it's going to reading trouble codes, and yeah, I don't have any trouble codes, so that's good. So I'm going to back out of that. I could click live data, so I could monitor one of the modules, and if I was having problems with a particular area on my Jeep, I could monitor for that. I could click on trailview, which we're going to talk about in just a second, and then I could monitor my tire pressures as well. We're actually going to go over to what's called adaptation. That's how you basically make changes to your Jeep from JSCAN. So I'm going to slide over to the adaptation, and as you scroll through, it can be intimidating looking at all the things that you can change on your Jeep, but just realize that you're probably only going to change like 5 or 6 things. Initially, maybe just 1 or 2, like changing the tire size. As you find something that you add to your Jeep, and if you need to change something, it's basically just going out in there and doing a Google search on how to change that with JSCAN. There's also a really good support for JSCAN. The developer answers direct emails, and there's also Facebook groups out there that are specifically for JSCAN owners, and they can give you a lot of help as well. But what we're going to do today is basically just change the tire size. So from adaptation, I'm going to scroll down to where there's tire and axle settings, and I'll click that. And then I want to go to tire size. And you're going to see that currently I'm set up at 32.5 inches, and that's because I had 33-inch tires. One thing important of note here is that you don't put in what tire size that your tire says it is. So for instance, my tire is a 33-inch tire, but it's actually not the true diameter of the tire. Typically, the true diameter of the tire, you would actually have to measure it with a tape measure, but sometimes you can get away with just like subtracting about a 1/2 inch from the tire. So I have 33-inch tires, supposedly, so I put 32.5-inch tires in. If you had a 35-inch tire, you could put 34.5-inch tires in. Now, if you don't do this, let's say for instance that you didn't make the changes on JSCAN, there's this really nice website that will show you if you go from one size tire to another size tire, how much your speedometer is going to be off. So for instance, I didn't initially have JSCAN when I upgraded my tires, so my speedometer was about 2.5 or 3 miles per hour off. If I had gone to 35-inch tires, my speedometer would actually been about 7 miles per hour off. So if I was going on my speedometer 70, I was actually going 77 miles per hour. So yeah, that could get you into some serious trouble. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and just put in 32.5 inches again for my tire. So I'm gonna scroll down and then go to where it says 32.5. And then click done. And then I'm gonna click go to set that. And it's going to go through and kind of make the changes in the ECU. And then it says great, changes applied successfully. So I click on OK. Then it says to finish up the procedure. So for some of these things, you need to turn off the ignition. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. And then what it wants you to do is open it and close it and leave it closed for about 5 minutes or so. You know, your Jeep kind of shuts down. And so after that shutdown procedure is done, and they want you to do it for just 5 minutes, just in case, then after that's done, you can turn the Jeep back on and the changes should be successfully applied. Yeah, so one thing that you might want to do is after you've made that change on your tire diameter size, you know, we kind of guessed. We think it's about 32.5 inches, but we don't really know for sure, and we don't exactly know how accurate that is. You might want to download a speedometer app. I did a quick app store search for free speedometers, and I got one, and it works really good. And so you want to check to make sure that your speedometer is accurate with that GPS unit. So get on the freeway, set your cruise control to like 65 or 70 miles per hour, and just make sure the two sync up. If the GPS is showing that you're going faster than your Speedo says, then you're gonna wanna bump that tire diameter up a little bit. If your GPS is lower than what your Speedo is, then you're gonna wanna bump that diameter down a little bit. So let's head on the freeway and let's see how accurate we are. And then we can adjust that as necessary. I have the cruise control set for 70, and it's showing pretty much, I think, consistently 71 on the GPS. And so that means that our tire diameter, it needs to go up just a little bit. So I currently have it set for 32.5 inches. So I'm gonna bump that up to 32.75 inches. It lets you basically increment by 1/4 inch, and we'll see if we can get it perfect. Let's see what our speedometer says now. Our speedometer says 70. We're pretty much exactly on the money now. So making that one change, changed it to where it wasn't quite right to where it's now right on the money. So yeah, works pretty good. So the last thing I want to show you is a thing called trailview. And I haven't seen too many people talk about this, but I think this is one of the really kind of outstanding features of JSCAN. I'm going to go ahead and load it up. So from the home screen, you hit trailview. And basically what it does, it'll show you at a glance the different parameters. So it'll show you what the temperature of your coolant is or your engine is. It will show you what the temperature of your transmission is. It will show you which drive you're in, whether you're in 2-wheel drive or 4-wheel drive, 4 high, 4 low, which gear that you're in, how much voltage you currently have. So it's really cool. So just the fact that it can show you that all at a glance, you know, you could kind of take the phone and you could put it up somewhere and mount it somewhere just to see all that stuff at a glance. But above that, it lets you make changes to your Jeep on the fly. So let's say, for instance, I just have a Sport S, so I don't have, you know, the front or rear axle locks. I don't have the disconnecting sway bar. But if you did, right, so it has these little buttons right on the top where you can click to lock the front and rear axle. You can click to disconnect the sway bar. Now, I guess that's not all that impressive in that you can just do that on a regular Jeep with the buttons, but it lets you not only do that in 4 low, but it actually lets you do it on the fly on 4 high, which is really cool. And it gets better than that. So the other thing you can do is you can click on the tap for more options, and then from here there's a lot of things you can do. I talked about basically taking away the traction control, so when you're off-road you really don't want to have any of those traction control features in place. So you can hit one button, this first one on the left, and basically that disables the anti-lock braking system, disables traction control. So let me go ahead and do that and you can see what happens. So I'm going to go ahead and disable traction control real quick. So we'll click that. Okay, and now it says the anti-lock braking system, it wants you to service it, and it also disabled the traction control. It disabled electronic stability control. You can see here, it actually kind of clicked the button for you for the traction control. So basically everything is off in regards to those stability controls, which is really super cool. The other thing that you can do really cool is there's this thing called winch mode, which basically when you hit the second button, it raises the RPMs on your Jeep when you're in park or neutral. So typically you'd be using the winch at that point, and sometimes you want the RPMs to raise when you're using your winch. So you would hit that button. And then those RPMs raise up, which is so cool. So I'm going to turn that off. And then the RPMs go down, which is great. Let's say your Jeep is running hot when you're off-road. You did a lot of big, you know, climbs or something, or let's say you're towing or something like that. They have an option for turning the fan on the fly. So you hit the fan button, and we'll hear the fan turn on. And there you go. You hear that? That's super cool. And we'll turn it off. And that'll lower your temperature. So you can see your temperature will start going down. And then finally, they have this kind of cool thing. It's like burnout mode. Taser does something similar, but you basically hit the burnout mode, and then you can start a burnout procedure. You kind of hit the start button and it gives you instructions for pumping the brakes a couple of times, and basically it locks the front brakes and lets you do a burnout. But I'm not going to do that. But maybe later. So that's kind of fun too. So that's just a lot of fun. I mean, there's a lot of useful things just from a monitoring standpoint, but also from making changes on the fly standpoint on your Jeep Wrangler. And so that's really cool. So one additional thing, if you really like the JSCAN software, and let's say you really like the trailview, you're going to have the OBD dongle connected to that security gateway. And when you make a visit to the dealer, if you're going to make a visit to the dealer, if they see that connected, they're probably not going to like it very much. Most dealers, I think, they will run a scan on your engine's computer just to make sure everything's okay. And they're not going to be able to run a scan without that security gateway original cables connected. So what you can purchase is this thing called gateway extension cables. Now Taser really sell these, but they sell them on Amazon, but they work just fine for JSCAN. And basically what they do is just extend, these plug in to where those original cables that we disconnected from, they go into that connectors, and then those original cables will then basically go into this connector right here. So it makes it a lot easier to unconnect and reconnect. And you would basically take those original cables and connect them back into here, and then just kind of stuff everything up underneath the dash. And the dealer probably won't think anything of it. I think these were like, I can't remember what these things were. I think they were like 22 bucks or so, but I'll have a link on the video's description. I will be doing an additional video focusing on some of the most popular features of JSCAN. This will include changing the TPMS threshold that I talked about. A lot of owners don't like it when they turn the high beams on, that the fog lights drop out, so I'll be covering how to change that. And a lot of owners also change the daytime running lights instead of the default configuration, so I'll show how to do that as well. As well as if you have anything that you're wondering about JSCAN that you can't quite get to work, you know, put a comment in and I'll do some research and maybe I'll add that to my list. I'll also be looking at some of the troubleshooting tools that come with JSCAN. I've got a really good moderator that is part of my Wrangler Jeeping for Beginners group, and I'm hoping to enlist some of his help on how he uses JSCAN for troubleshooting any problems. I think that would be really helpful. And so be on the lookout for those videos, and I hope to see you in the next one again very soon.